Hong Kong's new national security law is out, and it's way worse than anyone thought. What will it mean for Hong Kong protesters? Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Hong Kong is doing great from the perspective of the Chinese Communist Party. Beijing released the dreaded national security law that completely rewrites the rules of Hong Kong. And it seems to be going well. Yep, definitely quieted the unrest in the city. Everyone knew the national security law was going to be bad, but it's worse than anyone predicted. Joining me today is Anthony Dapiran, a Hong Kong-based writer, lawyer, and photographer. He wrote a new book called City on Fire, The Fight for Hong Kong. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.
So I just want to check with this new national security law. It's okay that we're talking, right? You are in Hong Kong.
Yeah, I am in Hong Kong, but I'm willing to confirm that I'm not going to collude with you to cause the Hong Kong people to hate the Chinese government today, so I think we're clear.
I mean, I love the Chinese Communist Party, especially Xi Jinping, so I don't know why there would be any problem.
Yeah, I think we're all good.
Yeah. So this new national security law, why don't you give us the terrifying highlights?
Look, the new national security law does much more than just create 4 new criminal offences under Hong Kong law, which it does in very broad, sweeping and vague terms. Acts of secession, subversion, terrorism and colluding with foreign forces are now all crimes in Hong Kong, punishable with up to life imprisonment, and they're defined very loosely to enable the authorities to apply them to many different situations. But that's just the start. The law also empowers China's national security bodies to set up an agency here in Hong Kong and to operate here in Hong Kong. It creates a new National Security Commission for Hong Kong, on which it's just been announced today that the head of the Central Government Liaison Office in Hong Kong, sent here from Beijing, will be sitting as an advisor, as a national security advisor. It dispenses with many traditional procedural protections under Hong Kong law for criminal suspects. It enables, in some serious cases, the mainland to assume jurisdiction over a case and take suspects from Hong Kong back to the mainland for prosecution and trial. It allows the Hong Kong chief executive to handpick the panel of judges who will be hearing national security cases, so effectively destroying the separation of powers and independence of the judiciary. And last of all, the power to interpret the law rests not with the Hong Kong courts, but with the National People's Congress in Beijing. And so they are ultimately the ones that decide how this law will be interpreted and applied. So it really is a sea change to the legal and political landscape in Hong Kong, and a significant change to the rule of law here.
Well, I think what's also shocking about the national security law is that it can apply to pretty much anyone in the world, right?
That's right. The law has extraterritorial application, which means that if anyone anywhere in the world breaches the law, and they do that in a way that is directed at Hong Kong, as the word the law uses, then they will be liable under the law. And so if that person travels back to Hong Kong or to China, they may be arrested for breaking the law.
So I probably shouldn't make a trip back to Hong Kong anytime soon.
You need to rethink your travel plans carefully, that's right.
Well, fortunately, the coronavirus had made me rethink all my travel plans.
Yeah.
So how is this going to affect Hong Kong protests?
Look, it's going to have a significant impact on Hong Kong protests. Already we saw on the 1st of July, the first day in which the law came into force, Hong Kong police were wielding a new purple warning banner, which read a warning to the crowds that they were chanting slogans or waving banners that showed evidence of a secessionist or subversive intent and were subject to arrest. So immediately a whole range of protest activity and speech activity that was perfectly legal in Hong Kong a few days ago is now potentially a crime under the national security law. So it very much changes what is and isn't permissible for political protest in Hong Kong, and I dare say will change the way that people engage in political protest going forward here.
So China had promised Hong Kong a degree of autonomy when it took power. Why do you think they felt this was necessary?
Clearly, the events of last year, the open defiance of Beijing rule over Hong Kong in particular that was shown through the protests last year, alarmed Beijing. At the same time, we have an administration in Beijing at the moment who are very strongly centralizing in terms of their view of power and their view of Beijing's control over the peripheries of the empire. And I think those things combine to make Beijing conclude they need to have a very powerful and assertive demonstration of their control over Hong Kong. And that's resulted in this demonstration of that control through enacting this new law.
So really, it seems like anyone who has been involved in these protests or anyone going forward really runs the risk of potentially getting sent to mainland China for trial and ending up in prison for life.
That's right. I mean, the one silver lining of this law, if it could be said to have one, was that it does not have a retrospective effect. So the law clearly states that it only applies to behavior from the date of the law going forward. One of the pro-Beijing spokespeople said it was sort of offering people the opportunity to have a clean slate, to wipe clean the slate of their past behavior. But what that means is you're quite right that anyone going forward who is engaging in behavior critical of the Hong Kong or Beijing governments may potentially become exposed under this new national security law. And if Beijing considers it an extreme case or a serious case, they might exercise their power to assume jurisdiction over that and take that person back to the mainland for trial.
Well, I know the Chinese Communist Party has never lied about anything before, but for someone like Joshua Wong, even if he were to be quiet from now on, do you really think Beijing is going to let him go away?
Look, I think that if he was genuinely quiet from now on, they would not have a basis to charge him under the law. But I don't think that's Joshua's nature. He's already clearly stated that he plans to continue his activism going forward. And so he may well find himself falling foul of the law sooner or later.
There are elections coming up in Hong Kong. How do you think this changes the game?
The national security law really changes the way that Hong Kong's pro-democracy legislators can run for election and then behave when they get into office. Traditionally, the pan-democrats have run on an anti-government platform and on a pro-democracy platform. Their key role as a permanent opposition party has been to criticize the government. And now it's increasingly looking like some of the actions that they've engaged in, such as promoting democracy, such as criticizing the government, such as filibustering inside the Legislative Council chamber, may potentially be crimes under this national security law, may potentially be considered subversion. And so they're going to have a complete rethink of the way that they position themselves, the way that they campaign, and the way that they behave when they get into office. And we're already seeing an impact in terms of many of the pro-democracy legislators being reluctant to speak out publicly about this national security law for fears that if they criticize it, that might result in them being disqualified from running for office. So it really is a big change for Hong Kong's pan-democrats.
Do you think there's anything the international community can do?
Clearly, the international community was very critical of this law from the moment it was announced, and they weren't able to stop Beijing enacting it, and it doesn't even appear that they were able to stop Beijing toning it down in any way. It's about as extreme as it could be. But I don't think that means that the international community should give up. I think that it certainly helps that the international community continues to pay attention to what's happening in Hong Kong. It's always better for there to be light rather than darkness cast on what's happening. And I think also the various offers of paths out, escape routes, if necessary, for Hong Kongers through what Britain are doing with their B&O passport scheme, and other countries have indicated they will do, provide at least some degree of reassurance or comfort to Hong Kongers that if they need it, they do have options should it come to that.
Do you think how the Chinese Communist Party has treated Hong Kong has affected how the international community views China?
Look, I think it's part of a bigger picture. Certainly, with the protests of last year, it's been a very visually arresting and prominent part or prominent symbol of China's flexing of its power around the world. But it's also coming in the context of a number of other things that are adjusting the relationships between China and the rest of the world, such as the US-China trade war, such as the recent clashes between Indian and Chinese troops in the disputed border areas there, there, such as foreign influence concerns in Australia, such as the Meng Wanzhou case and the arrest of 2 Canadians in China in connection with Canada's relationship with China. So it's part of a tapestry of much broader pattern that's clearly showing there's some kind of realignment going on between China and many of the other major countries in the world.
Thanks again for joining me today, Anthony. Again, the book is City on Fire, The Fight for Hong Kong. It's been a pleasure having you on with me.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
And thank you for watching. We also just did an extended interview with Anthony Dapiran on our podcast, China Unscripted, where we talk about things like how Hong Kong protesters are fighting back against the law with subversive humor and sticky notes. So check out the China Unscripted YouTube channel. Yes, we also have a separate channel just for the podcast. The link is in the description below. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time. Unless you're in Hong Kong, because I can't go back.